We often need to remind ourselves that when dead leaves are dead, it's okay to let them fall off the trees.
Wow, what a fantastic start to season 3. I felt renewed after having this conversation. Babs is more than a business leader and a life strategist. Listening to him describe his life growing up in Nigeria, discuss his family dynamics, and share what it took for him to carve his own path, it was truly a privilege. Our talk is full of lessons learned, vulnerable moments, and really great advice. So get your notepad ready because you are going to want to write some of this stuff down, I promise. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Communication 24/7 podcast, where we communicate about how we communicate. I'm your host, Jennifer Furlong. I know it has been a minute. I am so sorry. I had to take a small, well, not a small leave of absence, but a leave of absence. You know, life is hard. Things kind of happened. And that is one reason why I have a very special guest today. We are jumpstarting season 3 of the podcast. And I wanted to make sure, for selfish reasons, but for you all as well, I wanted to make sure that I had a special guest who is able to motivate us, to inspire us, to talk to us about strength and everything else that goes along with, picking yourself up when, life seems to just want to knock you down. I think all of us could probably use a little inspiration. So that's why I invited my guest today. I am so excited to have him on board the Communication 24/7 podcast. Now, before I go on saying too much, Babs, would you mind just introducing yourself to the audience? Let them know, what's your jam? What are you doing these days?
Hey, Jan, so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And thank you for the great work. It's great to see you again. I am Babs Faseesin, and I am the founder of Cracking the Life Code, also the author of the book Cracking the Life Code. I'm just a person who's very passionate about personal growth, personal development, and I've invested over 20 years of my life inspiring people all over the world just to become better versions of themselves. I know it sounds cliche, but frankly speaking, like you said earlier, we all need a bit of inspiration every now and again so we can keep going. Life does get tough, but yeah, I'm here to help, support, and provide inspiration where possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And y'all, I think Babs is being a little reserved. I want to tell you, he probably doesn't want to brag too much, but I have been stalking his socials for a little while. And this guy, you got to check him out. Yes, he is a business leader. He's a strategist. He is an author. He is a speaker. He's a world traveler. If you check out his socials, he is somebody who looks like, man, this guy has it together. He's got it going on. So I think he's going to be able to inspire us in a magical way. So I'm so excited for this conversation. Babs, tell us about your upbringing. How did you grow up, and where did this desire to help others and to motivate others come from?
Well, first of all, Jan, I have to say that you're very kind. So, so thank you for the kind words. I absolutely appreciate it. Speaking of the origin story, I was born and raised in Africa, Nigeria specifically, first of 3 boys. And my parents had a specific idea for how they wanted to raise 3 boys in the middle of a really difficult time in Nigeria. And They started off focusing first on education, then on character building.
Mm.
And the one last thing my father would always say is, you've got to be able to effectively communicate the thoughts in your head.
Mhm.
And that's one life skill that will save you or help you get to the next level in life. So communication was a very big piece of my growing up. So it's character building is education. Education because a lot of times people thought education was the way out of, poverty, out of
Mhm.
lack, out of, it's just security. The
Mhm.
assumption is that when you get an education, you might find, security in the future. And then character building, because my father would always say, my both parents actually, a good name is better than riches.
Mhm.
And so he would do everything within his power to protect that name. So character and integrity were words that I heard every day. So I think I was under 10 when I ran into the room one day and I saw my mom crying. And that broke my heart. I asked her why she was crying. She said she had received the bad news from her mom and she was unable to help her mom in that moment. So, as a little kid, seeing my mom cry hurt me so bad.
Mhm.
So, I said to myself, I'll do everything within my power as I grow older to live a life that allows me to provide help for my family and the people I care about at every point in life. But to do that, I started to think deeply about how I could experience life beyond my immediate circumstances.
Mhm.
I knew there had to be more to life than all that I experienced. I knew there had to be something else, beyond the devastation that surrounded my upbringing at the time. And I was very privileged to have a mother who is a librarian. And so she came home with a lot of books. And for me, as an introverted kid, I spent a lot of time in my bed. I spent a
Mhm.
lot. In fact, many of our family friends didn't know that I am the first child. They would often think my middle brother is the first child because he's the opposite. He's very active. He's social. He's all over the place. I, on the other hand, I'm always in my bedroom, alone with my thoughts. So the one way that I got my thoughts out was really writing. So I wrote a lot. I wrote a lot of notes. I wrote notes to inanimate objects. I wrote notes to just about anything. I wrote notes to the wall, my mirror. I just got my thoughts out by writing. So I read a lot of books and I continue to explore uh, inspirational books as my mom would help me bring them home from the library and I would read. And so I added a layer of reading to my general academic reading. So I hosted my first conference at 17. It had
Wow.
2,000 people in attendance. It was powerful. It had great speakers that inspired us, motivated us. And a lot of kids my age, slightly older, some in the mid 20s, were very inspired by that conference. Today, as I speak to you, some of them are, you know, doing exceptionally well. And they would refer to that conference as the launch pad or the starting point for them.
Mhm.
So I'm grateful for that. And so I knew very clearly at that point at 17 that, oh, yeah, the rest of my life is probably going to be centered around, inspiring people and challenging people to do and be better for themselves. So went through college. And I remember in college buying books. At this point, I was far away from home. And so I had to buy my own books.
Like an ouch.
Yeah. So I spent 75% of my pocket money just buying inspirational books. I like to say this funny thing that when I was getting out of college, my final year, I was leaving school. A lot of my friends were struggling to fit their clothing in their
Mhm.
suitcases. I was struggling to fit my books in my suitcase.
Mhm. Yeah.
I had
Stark
purchased
difference, right?
Exactly. I had purchased and read a lot of books, a ton of books. So while I was studying biochemistry on the one hand, I was also reading inspirational books. So daytime, I'm doing classes. Nighttime, I'm exposing my mind to a lot of inspirational materials. During this period, I found out there was a clear difference between really successful people and not so successful people. And I realized the one thing that separated the really successful people from the not so successful people was a mindset.
Mm.
I found out in college that to change the trajectory of our lives, we need to first change our mindset. I found out in college also that of all the creations of humanity, all through history, nothing has ever been created that was more powerful than the human mind.
Mhm.
If you want to change a nation, change their minds. And so I began to invest in my mind. I began to expose my mind to positivity. I began to read more books that exposed my mind to the kind of life that I wanted to live outside of college.
Mm.
It was also about the time I started to do a lot of public speaking. I was sharing some of this knowledge with my friends and, college students in other campuses. So it became a thing where I fell into that whole public speaking space by accident, just
Mm.
sharing the knowledge that I read. And then after college, first I have to tell a very interesting story because after college, having studied biochemistry, and if you know anything at all about African parents, only three professions exist:
Oh,
medicine, it's law, and engineering. And
really?
so if you are not in any of these three, you literally wasted your life.
Mm. Mm.
So coming from a family of three boys, where of course my brother's an attorney and this one was an engineer, naturally you believe that I would be the medical doctor, right? So for this reason, I studied clinical biochemistry with the intention of going to med school. But hey, I realized my path was totally different in college.
Mm.
And I realized I did not want to stay within the confines of the walls of a hospital, attending to one patient at a time when I can own the entire globe and speak to multiple thousands of people and
Mhm.
inspire them at once. So
Mhm.
rather than attending to one patient at a time in college, I said to myself, I want to just expose a lot of people to positive messages and inspiration. And I don't want to just see one patient at a time. I want to see thousands of people at a time. I want to inspire thousands of people at a time. But then that came with a challenge. I had to sell this idea to my parents, who believed that you only had to study medicine.
Right. Yeah.
And that conversation did not go well. My father tried so hard. Uh, but then he said to me one thing that inspired me and challenged me to this day. He said, you would spend the rest of your life working really hard to
Mm.
prove to me that there's so much more that you can do for yourself outside of the walls of a hospital. I took that up as a challenge. For some people, that might be, a discouragement. But I said, you know what? This is a bet. And
Mhm.
I would do everything within my power to show my parents that indeed there's so much more I can do for myself, for my family, for the society at large, without necessarily following the path that was, set out for me by my
Mhm.
parents. So I
Mhm.
began the journey of consulting, working in the business field. And now I found my desire, my passion, my ability to help solve business problems. That's really what propelled me in my career. So on the one hand, I am inspiring, thousands of people. On the other hand, I'm building a career because I believed very strongly that in order to teach other people, you've got to experience it yourself. You've got to learn yourself. And so
Absolutely.
I started to build a career in strategy, worked in consulting, worked in advertising, and grew through the ranks. And one day, a time came when an award was being given. And for some reason, I happened to be the individual who was receiving this award. So I invited my father. And he had a
Nice strategy.
front row seat in there. And my dad was, he was nodding. I said, okay,
Mm. Mhm.
maybe I'm almost there. And so after the award ceremony, we had dinner and I was just chatting with him. How do you feel now? He goes, well, I see you're doing great, but you're not there yet.
Aw. He's gonna keep pushing you.
I know, I know. So I got a master's degree and I said, how do you feel about my MBA? He said, no, you're not there yet. So 4 years ago, I went back to school to study for a doctorate degree.
Mhm.
And I would be wrapping that up this year. And I'm very excited that ultimately I would be able to give my parents a doctorate degree title.
Right.
Uh,
I am a doctor now.
exactly. But along the line, I've been able to do what I really wanted to do. Yeah. So after over 20 years of working really hard to build character, to find inspiration, failing at so many things, including relationships, failing at business. My first business failed, second business failed. I picked it up
Mm,
again and continued to try. And, after several failures, I then and learning from all of these failures and teaching people how to probably avoid some of my mistakes in life, I decided to write the book Cracking the Life Code,
I
which
see.
really
Yeah.
got launched last year.
Wow. Wow. What an incredible origin story. And it's just so fantastic to hear that you had such an incredible supportive family from the get go. And it sounds like because you had such a strong foundation, I'm sure in some way that gave you some of the ability to be able to, as an introvert, holding your first conference in front of thousands of people at 17, no less. That's not a small undertaking. How did you get, because I'm also an introvert. So everybody, I want you to understand, just because you're an introvert, that does not mean that you cannot get in front of people, speak your mind, make connections, and make a difference. You absolutely can. We just know that we might go about doing it in a different way from someone who is more extroverted than we are. So tell me about that part of it, recognizing being an introvert. I very much related to you talking about being in your bedroom, reading books. That's kind of like, it's exactly how I was. I was the complete bookworm growing up. I was, for a while, I was like the biggest Stephen King nut, but I wasn't reading motivational stuff. I was reading like horror novels for entertainment. So,
I love those too, by the way.
yeah, yeah. But, there is something to be said about being introvert, and we do find a sense of comfort in, exploring and having that type of journey within our mind. That's our specific way of feeling like we're developing, in a certain way. And it's energizing, to be able to do that.
That's
So
right.
how did you get to that point at 17 where you're like, you know what? I'm getting beyond the books. I'm going to allow myself to get out of this room and I'm going to put together a hell of a conference and everybody's going to want to attend this. What was that? Take me through that particular part of your journey. What was that like?
Well, firstly, I think it's important to bust this myth about being an introvert.
Yes.
I listened to Simon Sinek recently in one of his videos where he talked about this specifically. And
Mhm.
it's the
I
fact
think I
that,
probably know the video you're about to talk about.
yeah, where he really talked about introvert versus extrovert and, how the society, assumes that when you're an introvert, then you're socially awkward.
That's right.
But in reality, that's not what it means to be an introvert. Yeah. So the social butterfly, the extroverted person is
Mhm.
not in any way better off than an introverted person.
Mhm.
So the fact that you're introverted doesn't make you socially awkward. And if there's any introvert listening right now,
Mhm.
I like you to take this away that you're not different, you're not less, you're not
Mhm.
socially awkward. No, you're
Mhm.
just it's just a different way of recharging. It's a different way of experiencing energy. So
Mhm.
when you're around people, that's not how you recharge.
Mhm.
When you're alone, probably that's how you recharge. That's simply what
That's
it is. It doesn't
right.
make you socially awkward. So um, for me, I really, and thank you for highlighting the fact that my parents played a significant role in
Mhm.
my life. Um, so when I was 6, I had the opportunity of appearing on television. And so my father took that opportunity very seriously. So it was poetic. So I would write out a poem and I would recite the poem every Sunday. Every Saturday, it'll be recorded on Saturday at the television station and aired on Sunday. So that was my first exposure to limelight.
Mhm.
And so I'll do this every Sunday, even though it didn't quite have audience. I was
Mhm.
still, I had to face the
Yeah.
cameraman, the lights, and at the TV station. But that was where I really started to build the courage for the
Mm.
six, the
Okay.
courage to speak, the courage to face an audience and just say what's on my mind. And now when I get off that stage, I might just go back into my room for the rest of the day.
Absolutely. Yes.
But whenever I needed to show up, I did. And
Mhm.
it's the same mentality I have up until this day. So I can speak before a crowd of 5,000 people, and you
Mhm.
might never know that I'm an introvert.
Mhm.
But once I come off that stage, I could just go totally back into my
It's
hotel
exhausting.
room.
Yeah.
That's
Gotta go back into the cave and recharge.
Yeah, that's it. So I also had a community which is very helpful. It was a
Mhm.
church community. My mom was very active in church, and she'll bring me to church every Sunday, sometimes during the week.
Mhm.
Sometimes Saturdays I'm in church. That was very helpful also in building my confidence in
Mhm.
giving me a platform to showcase some of the skills and the talents that I had. And what I found to be interesting is during those days in church, I had parents say to my parents, they wish their kids would be like me.
Mhm.
And sometimes they would send their kids over to me and have them spend an hour with me on a Saturday. And so when I realized more parents were sending their kids over to me, and I was what, probably 12,
Mhm.
14,
Yeah.
I realized more parents on Saturdays kept sending their kids over to me to spend an
Mhm.
hour with me, 2 hours with me. So that was when I got the idea that I could create an event or a conference that just brings
Mhm.
everybody's kids together
Yeah.
rather than having them send them in piecemeals
Right.
to me or in piecemeal to me every now and again. So that was where the idea of you know creating a conference that brings young adults, teenagers together.
Mhm.
That was where it came from. And yes, I had to step out of my shell to do something had never done before. I had to reach within me to pull the energy and the idea and the thoughts to ensure that I create an experience that people I like to say it's the experience of the unforgettable kind.
Mm.
That people would leave that conference and know that they have become better people or better versions of themselves. And I put my all into it. It was during the break time in school, so I had a lot of time in my hands to organize and put all of that together. And it was a huge, huge success. But I guess the point is, whenever I need to do something that requires me to face the crowd or to step out of my shell, out of my comfort zone, I go out and do it. Uh,
Mhm.
and then when I'm done, I return to my shell and my comfort zone. So there's always the ability to step out of that comfort zone, to step out of that shell and do something powerful and something impactful. And then I come back to my shell and I recharge.
That's amazing, and it sounds like you were able to, at a very early age, realize, what your internal power was, what you were able to give to the world. And so many children, unfortunately, don't have that sense of community. They don't have that strong foundation, whether it's, the parents that are in the household, or maybe it's a broken home, or, they don't live in an area where there is a strong sense of community. That was my experience. Growing up in a broken home, and there was violence and drug abuse and alcoholism, and I really didn't get a sense of community. And I think this is what underscores the power of community that you talked about. Until I was in high school, really, I met one of my best friends in the world. And, I still have so much love for this woman. She and her family made such a huge impact on my life. Her father was the music minister at the local church. And when she and I, we became fast friends in high school, and she invited me to church. Next thing I know, I am being completely, embraced by everyone, in that community. And I got so involved, and I ended up being in the church orchestra and sang in the choir and, handbells, and then doing like summer trips before you know it. And I had never in my life experienced that strong, of a sense of community. And that is what really helped me kind of learn, that ability in myself to be able to reach out and make a similar, kind of difference in the relationships that I was able to build and to be able to begin influencing others. So that strong sense of community and that strong foundation for children, just I cannot emphasize that enough, to parents who are listening, anyone who is considering becoming a parent. I think that really is such an important aspect of a child's development. So it's so incredibly wonderful to hear someone's story who has had that type of an experience, and to see how it has helped you really create this amazing life where you are able to influence so many people. I think, just kudos to your parents for doing that. And kudos for you for being, I think, smart enough and aware enough to be thankful, and appreciative of that type of an environment, because there are some individuals, unfortunately, they do have that type of support system, but for some reason they're not able to embrace that support system. So I think that's just so incredible. I love hearing that story from you.
Well, thank you so
Amazing.
much. thanks,
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
for thanks for sharing. And it's
Mhm,
although we do have different
mhm,
experiences, it does seem as though we ultimately had similar
mhm,
approach
mhm,
to very different experiences. We ultimately embraced
mhm,
um, the brighter side of our
mhm,
experiences, and we
mhm,
allowed ourselves to continue to flourish in that side of our experience. I mean, when I was a kid, I did not think that my parents were doing the right thing.
mhm.
I thought my dad specifically. I remember actually walking up to my mom and asking my mom, "Are you really sure this is my dad?"
Mm. Like, why is he on my case all the time?
Yeah, why does he hate me so much?
Oh no. Why am I not good enough?
Yeah,
Well,
and
there is some of that as well. I think it would be it is important for us to underscore that there is that side of it as well, right? I mean, I
yeah.
think there are parents out there who think they are being supportive and that they are setting that foundation, but in some ways having that type of a demand on a child can be overwhelming. And I'm sure for you, you had some struggles with that. I'm sure that was a part of your journey as well, wanting to make sure that your father sees you in a certain way. You wanted him to see you as successful. You wanted him to see you as thriving in whatever path it was that you were choosing for yourself. Tell me about that part of it. Did you ever have any dark moments, or, with that particular struggle, in yourself, feeling like, am I ever going to get to that place where I feel like I'm being accepted? I feel like that this is good enough.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Um, there really isn't one parenting style that's 100% perfect.
Hmm. That's right.
So for kids, what we need to do is find the positives,
Hmm.
embrace them, and maybe just let go of
Hmm.
the not so great. So here's an example I I come home, math test or exams, and I have a 99%. My dad says, well, someone had 99.2%.
Yes.
I go, what? We all had A. He goes, no. He goes, someone else had 99.5%. So there was
Mhm.
this girl in my class who I could never beat her in math.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
tried so hard. She's always 0.2% more, 0.3% more. It's
Mhm.
99.7. I tried so hard. And so as a kid, I didn't like her. I disliked her so much because she was the reason my parents would always,
It's you. It's
yeah,
your fault.
I
Why are you
did.
so smart? Damn it.
I didn't like her at all. So there is an extreme to this
Mhm.
approach
Mhm.
where you begin to push the kids to, seek perfection
Yeah.
without realizing that to expect a perfect life out of a messy
Mhm.
world is a bit of a stretch.
Yes. Yes.
So perfection is an illusion. And I
Mhm.
understand that they want you to be the best you can possibly be,
Mhm.
but the best you can possibly be sometimes might just be what you have,
Mhm.
what you are, who you,
That's
in that moment. But
mhm.
so I had this weight upon my shoulder where
Mm.
every day I step out the door, I knew I had to perform at the very best. I
Mhm.
knew I had to do well in school. I knew I had to be a great child, a responsible kid in the society. I knew I had to just represent my family, and that was a
Mhm.
huge weight on my
Mm.
shoulder. And so I left thinking, some point in my life, I was just so scared because I just could not afford to do anything wrong. I couldn't
Mhm.
afford to miss it. I couldn't afford to drop the ball. In church, there's so many kids whose parents are looking up to me. At home, my younger brothers are looking up to me. In school, well, I've set a standard I can't afford to drop. And so it was just overwhelming.
It's
And
a lot
so
of
many
carry.
times I stayed in my bedroom, on my bed, and I would just cry and just
Mm.
wish that this was not the case
Yeah.
for me. But one thing that also helped me is although my dad was so tough, my mom was so tough, they brought us up, they brought us together on
Mhm.
Sunday nights at dinner table and shared how much they loved us.
Oh, yeah.
That balanced it for
Yeah.
me. So
Yes.
he could have gone through Monday through Saturday just bashing me and challenging me, pushing me and telling me and go harder. But Sundays, when we come to the dinner table, it's totally different. It's all about
Mhm.
how well you're doing. It's how much love they have for you. It's how much, how impressed they are about what you're doing. It's telling you how not so many kids could do what you do. And that inspires you. So it's a perfect blend of
Mhm.
showing love but then being extremely tough on the kids and then balancing both of them at every point in life. So I often say that, well, when they talk about love languages and they go, well, words of affirmation, I say to myself, well, I don't need any more words of affirmation, to be
Mhm.
honest. I was raised with a healthy dose of confidence, and
Yeah.
so that's not what I need now, because my parents instilled a lot of confidence in me. It was
Yeah.
like that, you can do it. And so
Mhm.
yeah, it balanced the toughness out with all that love.
You know, parents who are listening, I want you to take away something very powerful that Babs just shared with us. Um, Communication, the conversations that we have with our kids at the dinner table. What a powerful way to be able to express your support, your admiration, your love to your children. This is going to be a heartbreaking thing that I reveal to you, Babs. I volunteered at a high school for some time here in Savannah, Georgia, and I would go in and talk to the kids about leadership traits and qualities and communication skills and all of those things. And one time I asked this group of kids, how many of you have dinner at the dinner table with your family just so you can have time to have conversations, like just what you were talking about. And out of, we'll say, like 100 kids, like maybe two would raise their hands. And at that moment, I felt so awful for these kids because they are missing out. What you experienced at that dinner table has made such an incredible difference in your life. You talked about confidence. That helped instill that confidence. The power of those dinner time conversations at the table as a family cannot be underestimated. So I'm so glad that you brought that part of your story up, because I think it's key, it's critical, and I think it's something that is also being lost in a lot of families today. We have so many distractions with social media, and a lot of families, stay just uber busy with anything and everything. Let's sign the kids up for everything under the sun, and there's no time for that conversation to happen. So I think that's the power of having those Sunday conversations with your parents.
That's
Mhm.
that's that's right. Actually, in my book, Cracking the Life Code, after discussing everything about cracking the life code, I made
Mhm.
it a point to ensure that I wrapped that book up by saying that after you have cracked the life code, after you have built the behaviors and the habits and the mindset that's required for personal success, you have one responsibility.
Mhm.
And that responsibility is to transfer all that you have learned to the next generation.
Mm,
And I
mhm.
suggested in my book that the way to do that is to have conversations around dinner table.
Yeah.
That's the point where you share all the values, all
Mhm.
the behaviors and the habits that helped you succeed. You share
Mhm.
those with the next generation. Next generation might be your immediate kids. That
Mhm.
could be your grandkids. But it's
Right.
important to preserve the dinner table as a
Mhm.
place where you transfer these positive, new, inspiring, and empowering codes to the next generation.
And being able to have those conversations about, no matter what, we're going to fall, we're going to fail, we're going to have difficult experiences, in our life. So even when we think we've got it figured out, something's going to come out of nowhere and it's going to just throw you a curveball. But if you have that strong foundation you've been able to build, you can better handle those types of challenges that come your way. What type of advice do you give to people who ask you about, you seem like you have it all together, and life seems like so perfect, and you've just kind of you have cracked the code, right? You've cracked the code. What do you say to them about, hey, don't get the wrong idea. I mean, yeah, things are great, and they can be great. It's all about, attitude and positivity, but that doesn't mean that bad things are not going to happen. What do you say to them about that?
Well, yeah, I hear a lot of people say to me, "Do you ever have a bad day?"
Yeah. And you're like, well, I am human.
The truth is, I probably have more bad days than the average person.
Okay.
That's actually my reality. I have probably more bad days than the average individual.
Mm,
Because it never gets easier as you go higher.
yeah.
It just becomes a lot more difficult. Maybe the types of challenges that you encounter are different,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't mean that you ever come to a point in life where everything is all figured out. I wish I could get there where
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
everything is all figured out. But truth
Right.
is, we're constantly trying to figure this thing called life out.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
constantly working hard to ensure that we figure this out. For me, I have determined that all I need is focus on three things and I'll
Mhm.
be fine.
Mm,
It's habits, it's mindsets, and behaviors.
mm,
So my behaviors, my habits, and my mindset can determine whether or not I continue to move forward regardless of the obstacles.
mhm,
So there are days where I wake up and it's really a bad day.
mhm,
Here's what I have decided to do in those days. I decided to shut my mind
Mm.
because I have worked so hard to build a really positive mind. And so I would not let an external factor affect my mind.
Mhm.
So when negativity, which might come from work, might come from family, might come from friends, could come from anybody, neighbors, when negativity is coming, I smell it from a mile away
Mhm.
and I
Yep.
shut my mind and bounce it back. I do
Mhm.
not let it penetrate my mind. What's
Mhm.
external, I don't have control about what's external, but what's internal is mine to control. And
Right.
so I build a wall around my mind to deflect negativity. And so when I wake up in the morning, I'm trying to surround myself with positive energy, positivity. I read stuff that inspire me. I expose my mind to positive stuff. And so regardless of what's going on in my day, in the outer wall that's bigger than me, I just make sure what I can control, which is within me, I keep it intact.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
listened to someone say this um, very beautifully. And the person said, you could be on the boat on the water, and if water does not get into the boat, you
Mhm.
will most likely not sink.
Mhm.
So as long as you do not let water into the boat, you would not sink. You would
Mhm.
continue to power through. In other words, the external environment, the noise and the negativity that exists around us in society, if we do not allow those to penetrate our hearts and penetrate our minds such that it weakens the level of positivity within us,
Mhm.
then we would continue to move forward. So I like to say there's power within you to deflect all that comes to you on the outside. So yes, I do have bad days, but I recognize that my response to a bad day is more important than the bad day itself. So
Mm.
it's all
Mhm.
about the attitude, how I perceive the bad day. Again, it's again about my mindset about a bad day. It's
Mhm.
one day out of 365.
Yeah.
And so I will get past this day. And frankly, I may not have all the energy in me to do the things that I really want to do on that one day, but there will be tomorrow.
Right.
There will
Yes.
always be another day. So today could be a bad day. I'll embrace it. If it's
Mhm.
a failure, I'll take on the failure. I'll embrace it.
Mhm.
I'll take the lessons from the failure. And then tomorrow is a new day. I'll
That's
start
right.
afresh tomorrow.
That's right. I love that. Tomorrow is always a new day. I love the boat analogy because things will happen and something can strike that boat and it may cause a teeny crack, in the boat. But we got to identify, right? We got to look for it, identify, oh, this is where the water's coming in. And then we got to figure out a way. How are we going to patch this up to fix it? So I love that analogy. I'm going through talk about having bad days. And, I've had people ask me as well, like, how are you doing? How are you getting through this? It seems like you're doing fantastic. And truth be told, I'm having some really hard days. I'm still having some really hard days. After 27 years of being together, my husband and I are getting divorced, just waiting on the judge to sign the papers. It has not been easy. It's not something that I saw coming. It's not something that I wanted. And so there's a lot of internal struggle going there. There's a lot of days where you just want to kind of lay in the bed all day. You just want to feel sorry for yourself. You go through the emotions of being angry and then you feel sorry for yourself and then you get mad and then you get sad and then you find hope because you can see, well, there is another tomorrow, right? There is always a tomorrow. But you can go through all those emotions in the span of like a minute, right?
That's
Like
right.
you can experience all of that. So it's not that we don't have bad days and we don't have bad moments. One of the things that I've learned to do is I give myself permission to have a temper tantrum for like 20 minutes. I know if I can feel like I've got this irritation, this frustration, this anger, this kind of building up, and I don't know what to do with it. I'm like, okay, let it out. Give yourself a good 20 minutes, do what you got to do, just let it out. But then once that time is over, all right, hit the reset button. Let's sit and let's think about how we're going to respond to this situation. And I really do appreciate that you said that actively seeking out things that bring you joy, bring you positivity. It doesn't mean that you're not experiencing anything bad. It just means that you're learning to balance or at least try to offset that with things that bring you joy. So whether it's something you read or write or something that you're watching, looking at a beautiful piece of art, whatever it is, to kind of, you have to actively seek that out. You have to make a choice. You do. I said a few days ago to a close friend, I said, I don't want to be a bitter person. I don't want to be an angry person. So even though I do have moments where I am bitter, where I am angry, but I don't want to be that way. So you seek out things to try to help you transcend, that negative type of emotion. But the work cannot be overemphasized enough. It is work. It is, to
Yeah,
have to get to that place and to try to maintain that.
that's right.
Hmm.
The beautiful thing is, thank goodness we don't look like what we've been through.
Right? Seriously.
Yeah, it's a great thing we don't look like what we've been through. I
Mhm,
like to say, in encouraging, and thanks for sharing that vulnerable moment.
mhm,
Um, and I'm sure a lot of listeners can identify or
mhm,
perhaps just see themselves in these
mhm.
stories and understand that we are all humans and everyone's going through something or another.
Absolutely.
And we are just here to encourage each other and
Mhm,
strengthen each other and find the inspiration to keep going,
mhm,
regardless of what we're going through. I often encourage my clients and friends that, listen, what's coming is often bigger and better than what's gone.
mm,
Um, and so when we focus on what's coming,
mhm,
we gain a better perspective. It's always not easy when we go through really tough moments.
mhm,
I'm still dealing with the loss of my mom,
mm.
given everything I just said about, you know, the
Yeah,
wonderful person that my mom was.
yeah,
So finding that, mom is not even here to help launch my
yeah.
book, uh,
Mm,
that devastated me significantly, and I've tried really hard to walk through those really dark moments
mhm.
and see where there is some positivity and
Yeah,
just lay hold on the hope and the positivity, and understanding that this moment will pass and there
mhm.
will be a lot more brighter days ahead.
Yeah. I love that you said that, what's coming is bigger and greater than what has passed. And I'm sure, yeah, it sounds like your mother was an incredible mom, and not just an incredible mom, an incredible woman. My father passed away about 23 years ago in 2000. And even though growing up, it was very difficult, with all of the things that I mentioned earlier. As an adult, when I became an adult, he had managed to get a lot of his life together again. And so we found each other again and we became best friends.
Uh,
And so to have someone who is like on your side, in your court, they're like,
yeah,
just boosting you up and supporting you and kind of like your own cheerleader in a way, to have that sense of support, not be there in your most important moments, like whether it's a book that's being released, that's a big deal to publish a book, or, any other of life's biggest occasions. We always feel that hole, that's there. And so my heart goes out to you because I know that is a huge hole right there in your life. And we're not the only ones. I'm sure there are plenty of people, who are listening to this who have had a similar experience. Do you find yourself doing similar things, when you feel yourself missing, your mom? Like I find myself missing my dad, on certain days. Do you just actively seek out ways to commemorate her memory, or do you allow yourself a moment to just kind of feel the feels? Like, how do you handle those moments? Because I know it's different for everybody.
Yeah, dealing with grief is not fun at all.
Yeah.
And 6 months in, you feel like, oh yeah, I'm in a better place now. And then
Yeah.
suddenly,
Yeah. Right. It'll be random. Yeah.
yeah,
It's so random.
suddenly one day it just knocks you down
It
again.
does. Yeah.
Yeah, dealing with grief is not it's not exactly fun. What my brothers and I have decided to do is every once in a while on our group chat, we would just find some beautiful memories
Mhm.
um, of some fun experiences we had with mom, and someone will drop it in the group chat, and we would laugh and just
Yeah.
smile, and sometimes that will just drop something in there that reminds us of those beautiful experiences we had
Yeah.
with mom. I think she's probably the most powerful woman I've ever
Mhm.
known. My
Yeah.
mom, soft spoken, very quiet, calm, but in her calmness and her really quiet nature was power. She
Mm.
was more powerful in her silence than she was even when she spoke. So
Mm.
we would remember these beautiful times and experiences every once in a while, and we would encourage each other to say, well, she's with us, she's probably just not here physically, but she's definitely with us in the spirit, and
Yeah.
that sometimes can be encouraging.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I see a theme. I'm hearing a theme, and that, no matter when that darkness is creeping in, no matter if it's we're grieving over the loss of a loved one, or we're feeling that self-doubt, we're just having a bad day for whatever the millions of reasons that exist that we can have a bad day. There's just something not going right in our lives. To be able to actively seek out a way to bring in that positivity. It's not just going to happen on its own. I love that you and your brothers will, find whether it's a picture or just reminiscing a story that will bring a smile to your face and make you laugh to bring in a happy memory. That's such a powerful tool to use. And it makes sense, but I think we just need to be reminded of that. We do have that power in ourselves to actively seek out those moments that are going to bring a smile to our face. And it is difficult. It's very difficult to happen, but if we can share those moments with others like you do with your brothers, I think that's a testament to how it works. It really does work. Babs, I got to tell you, I think we could have a conversation for another hour because I love your story. I love your vibe. I think you just bring such an amazing energy. And even though we're like in an online room, if you will, the online studio, I can feel your energy from where you are. Are you located in New York?
Yes, I
Yeah,
am.
yeah. So I'm down here in Savannah, Georgia. So even though we are hundreds and hundreds of miles away, just being able to see your smile, and just to hear the power. You talked about your mom being, that quiet yet firm kind of, confident way. I think that's probably something you got from your mom because I can feel that calmness in you. I'm sure you're probably the person that everybody feels that they can come to talk to about a lot of different things that are going on in their life. Is that true?
I have no doubt you're very, very intuitive. Definitely, you're spot on that. Yeah, people often say personality wise, I take after my mom 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I'm sure those who are closest to you really feel that energy as well, and they appreciate that. Before we begin to wrap up this conversation, I knew we were going to have a fantastic conversation from the beginning. I'm going to have you come back so that we can continue having, we'll just talk about all kinds of other things. Is there anything that you wanted the audience to know, or I'm sure we're going to get to the how they contact you, but is there a question that you wish I had asked so that there's a message that you can send to the audience before we wrap things up?
Well, thank you for the opportunity, but frankly, I don't exactly believe that we need a ton of messages. I
Yeah.
think in this conversation, for me personally, I have taken away a lot
Mhm.
just from this conversation, and I think the listeners have a lot also to think about in this
Mhm.
conversation.
Mhm.
One thing I would probably just like to leave the, the listeners with is we often need to remind ourselves that when dead leaves are dead, it's okay to let them fall off the trees. See, a lot of times we carry, this baggage from the past, so many things that do not exactly serve us today. Sometimes they're just sentimental. We're just sentimentally attached to certain things, but in truth, they don't serve us anymore. Those are like dead leaves. Could be dead relationships, could be dead partnerships, could be, you know, it's okay to let dead leaves fall. Here's what happens. Personally, fall is my favorite time of year. In the fall, you see these beautiful colors. The trees turn, beautiful shades of orange, yellow, and it's just so, I just love the fall season. But what happens is right after that phase, those same leaves begin to die.
Mm.
And when they die, here's what happens. The tree lets them fall off. So they fall off the trees. And what the trees do is they conserve their energy for the next spring.
Mm.
So when we let dead leaves fall off of their own accord, what ultimately happens is we conserve our energy for our next blossoming, for
Mhm.
our next flourishing. So, as many people as are listening in today, I hope that we would spend some time with ourselves over the next hour, day, week, and just think and reflect over some of these dead leaves that really are just weights on our shoulders, and just let them go so we can reserve and conserve our energy for the next phase of flourishing.
That was beautiful. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing that. How do we find you?
Crackinthelifecode.com is
Mhm.
our website. We're always happy to receive an email from everybody at
Mhm.
help@crackinthelifecode.com. I'm active on social media. It's Babs Faseesin on social media. And my book is available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold. It's Cracking the Life Code.
Again, thank you so much, Babs.
Thank you.
This was such a fantastic conversation. Y'all, like I said at the beginning, this is the first episode of season 3. I wanted to bring someone special on board to be able to have, just a meaningful conversation. Like Babs said just a moment ago, I think there's a lot of fantastic messages that we were able to bring forward, during this conversation. So let it marinate for a little while. Think about it, and figure out how, if one of these messages or all of the messages is something that maybe you need, hopefully, to bring you forward into the next day. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review.